Hi. Okay, so you have reached the end of our course. It's called Global Communication. I hate the word global, but global and local equals global. It's about communicating, and in our classes, we focused on being able to improve our confidence to speak to each other. In the digital classes, I tried to work on appropriate responses and being able to have a fluid, natural conversation. And in the projects, I was attempting to bring to the digital realm what I would normally do in a real classroom. For some, it was very challenging. A few of you really hit the ball out of the park. You did really well. And I want to just review first about the projects so that you understand what I was looking for and what to aim for in real classrooms. So a couple of things. So in this slide, obviously teaching children English, children are different to adults. They don't know why they're in school. They don't come there by their own choice. So their attention span is short. Their motivation is weak. So it has to be made exciting, short exercises, keeping them engaged. You are trying to aim for an activity-based approach, keeping students active as much as possible, and that can be task-based activities. So in this slide, for example, spotting differences in between two pictures could be one. Reordering picture sequences. So you've told them how something is made, like how the table is made from recycled chopsticks. Then you put up pictures with numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have to tell you the correct sequence in which that happens. So in the real classroom, you want movement. Digitally, you can still explore the senses, which is not just listening to someone talking, but reading, and of course, doing things. Realia you can't use, but visuals, anything that is visually stimulating is important. Variety is key, which is why I gave points for using multiple formats, different techniques, different platforms, apps, programs, to keep it interesting, new, innovative. Not just a wow, that's cool for no particular reason, but different formats to keep young learners engaged. And going back to that involvement, it's very important, 5 points, to get students as active as possible, get them doing things. In a real class, that's probably easier to organize. Online, digitally, it's more challenging. Most of you got the assessment part, which was at the end, what we'd call summative assessment, which is something you're familiar with. I, in this course, do formative assessment, which is continual assessment during the course. You should still do that in your projects as well, and keep them involved throughout. How do you do that? Well, I shared this file on the stream and nudged you towards it several times to try and use the ones in orange. Few of you did. Now, a lot of you asked questions, for example, and typical questions were open, like, what do you think of? That's a really difficult question to answer, especially in English, a second language. So I was trying to guide you towards multiple choice, true or false, or which one is different, which is the odd one out, which is another way of saying, which one is the odd one out. Number 7, this one. Few of you did use those, so even things like Kahoot questions, it's better to have many short interactive questions than difficult to answer questions with 4 choices. Fill in the blank. Gap fill was rarely used as well. So instead of you telling, get students to tell you. Or finish the sentence. Like, I think that recycling chopsticks is, and they have to finish the sentence, a good idea, is good for the environment. Things like this. Matching words and pictures. So you tell them about a process. They have to match the word describing one part of that process with the image that you show on the screen. Or they have to match a word with a similar word. For example, roll the dice, throw the dice. Here, roll and throw are synonyms. Seat and chair are synonyms. Hypernym, hyper is the bigger name, so the name of the group. If you say like blue, gold, red, what's the group name? Meaning what's the hypernym? It's colors. And maybe they have to chat in the window, type in the chat window, or choose a question that comes on the screen, like I'll do with Edpuzzle shortly. Or hyponym. Again, you say colors and students have to name members of that group. So if you say colors, they might say blue, red, gold. Even anagrams or scrambled words are fun occasionally. Sometimes they're quite difficult. But if you give the name of something, like going back to recycling, instead of typing it in the screen R-E-C-Y, you mix up the letters C-L-Y-N-G-I-R-C, and students have to tell you what the unscrambled, the correct word is. Now, I've shown some of you an activity I used many years ago with Classroom English, for example. This is a Prezi slide. Are you listening carefully? I've highlighted ly because the whole lesson is about looking at adverbs, ly. And then I would show a slide like this, right? And I'd say to them, okay. So again, instead of me just telling, I could say, is it a team game? Say yes. How many are in each team? They should say 3. Who writes the word? Who gives the word? That's me, the teacher. What do you have to do? And again, digitally, you're highlighting the part you're talking about. So when I'm doing this with my cursor, they can say, okay, mime the action that you say. Is speaking allowed? No, speaking is not allowed. You have to be quiet. And you'll see with each slide, again, you could ask one person, say a question, Bogyang, read this, how's she driving? And I don't give the answer immediately. You give a picture, students can think what it is, they might know it in Korean and tell you, in which case you'll say, what is that in English? And they say, well, duh, and if they can't guess, you give them a further hint. D-A-N, dangerously, right, she is driving dangerously. And how is he dancing? Happily. And then you could vary the questions. So now they should hopefully remember it's a how is question. How is, probably a man would do this. How is he walking his dog? Lazily. And this is, again, I've taken out more of the question. So this is just both finish the sentence and gap fill. And slowly getting more difficult. So now they have to finish the whole question. And each one is all an ly word, like this. A lot of you weren't using simple techniques like this. And it's tough. I think when you think of the word presentation, you think about telling others. I was trying to get you to think about engaging others. A lot of you were speaking directly to classmates instead of thinking, how do I transfer these presentation skills to suit young learners? So there are things that you can learn from this, and hopefully you'll be able to use some of the techniques, even just simple things like this, to become a more engaging teacher. Now, with tasks, what we call task-based learning, there's often difficult words. or here it says linguistic forms, difficult words that come up. You can pre-teach them, make sure that students know what the words are before, or have them guess, but basically you have to make sure that it says here, develop relevant schemata. That is, what do students already know? You want to activate that, you want to get them to use what they already know, and then move on to things they don't know. So back to that recycling example, you could ask them, which items do you recycle? And they'll tell you things like, a bottle or plastic cup. Okay. How about chopsticks? Do you recycle them? No? Okay, then let's look at how chopsticks can be recycled. So you're moving from what they know to something they don't know. Here it says, reduce the cognitive complexity of the task. Make it easier for students to be able to do the task. The task is meant to be the bridge to learning. It's not meant to be the challenge of completion. So if there's a difficult process like a game, like the bomb game, for example, rather than jumping in, you might show a video of other students, other people doing that game. So then they can see how it works, and you have reduced the difficulty of the task. The game will work more successfully. So again, I'm borrowing from an old book I had when I was doing TEE. Of course, teaching English through English or immersion teaching is, like this class, is quite tough because everything you get is in a foreign language. This video, you can use things like YouTube, of course, which I will upload. And that's what I did for my channel for Classroom English when we were teaching, well, that's the first part of COVID. And then, at least with YouTube, you have such features like, of course, CC, so when you are playing, you get subtitles, and even better, you can show the transcript. So then, with the transcript here, you can even, of course, open the transcript, which was, show transcript, and copy and paste it into Translate, and you've got everything in Korean. So there are digital tools to make things a lot easier. I was using those for the first year of COVID for a much more difficult course than this one. But yeah, you can do that for this video, of course. Another thing was, or we briefly said in most classes, think about your key focus, which with an English class is getting students to use and develop their English. So get students doing, we've said many times. Help them to understand. Turn statements into questions. So instead of telling students what to do, you ask, because you've given them information in pictures or notes, or they're using their schema. They should tell you. So we said when it comes to, for example, some of you might explain a difficult process. So let's say you were doing something on architecture and you had to tell students what a protractor is. And you say, does anyone know protractor? No, it's an instrument having a graduated arc for plotting or measuring angles. Whew. Too difficult. That's like using giving a difficult word with even more difficult words and more of them. That's to be avoided. You could use a picture. If you just showed a picture like this, have you seen this before? Yes. What do you call it in Korean? Right, we call it a protractor in English. That would be a much easier way to get across what a protractor is. So avoid explanations. You could just use the easiest one. What is this in Korean? By showing the picture, as we said, translating. You could give similar words if it's possible. Protractor, not really any. Angle finder, but that's a bit agricultural. Drawing would work in this case. So think of different ways, avoiding this, avoiding telling them in Korean, them telling you in Korean is fine, to help, again, turning statements into questions. And back to this slide. Yeah, you want cooperation, not competition. And that's where gameplay comes in, where they have to work together. Each individual has different tasks in a pair or a group to solve problems. One of the difficulties we had is everyone's sitting at home alone. There's not much cooperation. And only in the bomb game did I feel students were working together despite not being together. And that's something that is difficult and would need a lot of skills and practice to develop digitally, but something to remember when you're back in the classroom. Another common problem of the projects was reading what's on the screen. Don't read what your viewer can read for themselves. So if you put this slide up, you ask a question. How many cars are there on the road? And because it's numbers, this helps make it easy to answer. And then you could ask a student to read. Junha, can you read here? He says over 260 million of them need to find a park. Make sure they understand the sentence. What is them? Right? Cars. What's the problem? Are there, and instead of asking an open question like that, give them a choice. Are there too many parking spaces or too few parking spaces? You've broken it down, reduced the cognitive task, the difficulty, and they will say there's too few parking spaces or there are too many cars. So break it down, use numbers. And I didn't see many, if any, graphs. Graphs are a great way of putting across information. So again, visually, students can read. You can make sure they understand what's on the x-axis, right? Times of day, what's in the y-axis, percentage or amount. What is the peak number? When are the peak number of tweets sent? You can either give them a hint or they could read down here. But again, they're reading and telling you, which is the important part. And bring out the important parts of the slide. So if you were doing tech, what has changed us regarding tech in the COVID era? Let students digest this or pick someone to read. You say, so, what does this number mean? And you break it down. Is it higher or lower than this number? Higher, right. And then you're giving them a choice question. What percentage of adults would plan to buy wearable technology in the next 2 years? Easy, 32%. So it's increasing. Slides like this are great too. Picture with minimal text highlighting your key areas. So if you were doing wearable tech as your project, you give students a chance to look at this and let them brainstorm. Again, this is activating schema or schemata. Have them tell you what wearable technology is there in the medical field. What do you know? And some people might say Fitbit or like a pacemaker, heart monitor. If terms are difficult, you can give some choices on the side of the screen or on a slide. And they have to match the choices, like Fitbit goes under medical. Health and wellness, well, they're very similar, I think. But like even an Apple Watch, which monitors your health patterns, etc. So you could have a list of different things. Students have to group them or match them to the correct category. Another simple slide. Ensure they know what gender means. So again, you could just tell gender means male or female, or you could ask, do you know what gender is? Right, and give them keywords, male, female, men, women, boys, girls. Who talks more about smart apparel, men or women? you can easily see. When I say more, you can easily see which profile it is. So again, it's engaging students. Simple question. And this is something I think my wife could use. Probably if I had a slide like this, I would cover this and just tell them, can you guess what zukuri is? Students will probably say something like, never lose your eyewear. Right, so zukuri is probably an app. Or, yeah, it's probably an app. I think students will be guessing finishing the sentence for you. Simple slides. Keep them simple, gap fill, students telling you. Okay, that's projects. On to our conversations. Now we used the wrap party questions from each unit, and the goal was to try and join different questions together into a natural conversation. Some of you got it, a lot of you found it very challenging. So, you know, if we look at an example like this, you can see we're talking about health, most important. Do you have any scars? So we've jumped to the question without mentioning about scars first. It would be very strange to say, hey, how are you today? And they say, fine, thanks, I'm feeling good. Do you have any scars? You're talking about health, yes, but you wouldn't jump to that question. Keywords are the essential part of this. So if you say, yeah, I'm fine, except I fell, you know, where's my arm? I got a scar like this, fell off my bike. Question, do you have any scars? So you've led in, you've given your information about it first, then you've talked about it. And this, in this particular conversation, happened for every part. It's a desperate attempt to use the questions in the book without thinking about how to knit them together naturally. I think some of you would benefit from having the conversation in Korean first, recording it, sticking it into Papago or Translate, and then polishing up the English or thinking about how to use the questions from the book in English. I'm pretty sure you wouldn't have a conversation like this in Korean. And as I say, keywords, scar, sick, danger, those are the best ways to talk about it, then ask a partner about that question. So I've said some of the best ways to do this is one person asks a question, a second person answers that question, and the first person asking gives a comment or response. Now you remember the comments and responses, and we're going to use these, or we did use them last week. These are all good ones to use, and it shows you're got an emotional response. You're not a computer. And the third person gives their information. They then talk about scars or information and ask a question, related question about, well, their next question from Rap Party. That helps, makes it natural. That's why I had groups of 3. If it's just one person asking another, it can turn into an interview, which is bad. And by interview, I mean questions like, what gives you the most stress? Student says, parents give me the most stress. Does your family use Chinese medicine? No, they don't like Chinese medicine. Did you ever eat food that made you sick? Obviously, that's like an interview, just a list of questions. Most of you didn't do that. But the key was really trying to add as many different responses and not just give a response and immediately ask a new question, but that's where the third person can kick in with a response, and the second person can answer, and then the third person can answer before second or third asks a new question, related question. It's quite difficult, and we'll go over this. Hopefully we'll have better responses in our last activity. So here's a good example. Start off with, yeah, I'm stressed out, I'm resting at my house. That's too bad. Comment. Natural question. What do you do to relax? Answer given. Question to the next person. How do your parents relax? Relieving stress by doing this. Again, response. And then I eat food, delicious food. What kind of food do you usually eat? So there's information given first before the question is asked about that same topic, in this case food. This is good. Lots of short interactions, keywords used to link the conversation. Could hopefully see more comments, as I said, from this responses table, but other than that, that would be a good example. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up today. That's all for this class. Hopefully you get all the questions correct to demonstrate what we have learned. I hope, if nothing else, your confidence has improved at speaking with each other. Digital teaching is tough. Digital learning, I think, is tough. But this gives you a good taste of how to transfer classroom skills into digital ones. I hope it's helpful.